Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another BiteSSSize best practice webinar brought to you from Scottish Student Sport, our first webinar of 2021. And what better subject to look at in January than engaging the inactive and looking at ways where we can reach those members of our student and staff populations and encourage more active lives and better physical activity agendas. We've got an amazing panel today. We've got Sarah Robertson, who's the Health Promotion Manager from out at the Orium at Heriot Watt. We've got Fraser Johnston, National Club Development Manager from Scottish Cycling. And we've got Ian Lowe, our very own Ian Lowe, who's our new Head of Development at SSSize. 2 weeks in the role and still here, so a good start to 2021. But Ian comes from a student sport background, and his most recent role before SSSize was with student services at University of Abertay. So there's a real depth of knowledge across all our panel today. I'm looking forward to hearing more from them. If anyone of our participants do have any questions throughout the course of today's webinar, feel free to use the Q&A function. Just pop your question in there and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. We've got a few presentations to go through first, and then we'll look at questions. If anyone has any examples from their own institution or their own organisation of best practice around engaging the inactive communities that we deal with, then of course feel free to share those examples as well. There's a real good variety of people on the call as attendees today. There's our sports presidents and staff at SSSize member institutions. There's a few governing bodies represented. There's also some local leisure trusts and other people working in sport. So any examples that you do have of really good ways of engaging the inactive populations, any that have worked and also those that haven't worked, there's always something to learn from those areas. So just before we get started, just going to reshare the slides just to frame the conversation a little bit better. So share my own screen. Hopefully this works. Here we go. So when we're thinking about engaging the inactive, just to think, so this is from the Sport Scotland strategy, Sport for Life. So not everyone in Scotland will be sporty, but everyone can be active in some way. So it's important when we're making these discussions that it's not always focused on sport, but in physical activity in general, and the benefits that that can have for physical and mental health. Again, just thinking about what we mean by inactive. So this is from the British Medical Council. So adults should be getting at least 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity at least 5 days per week. So this is what we mean when we're talking about inactive individuals, whether that's student or staff at our member institutions. This is the kind of area we're looking at. And then looking at the Bucks active student survey from 2019-20, these are some of the barriers to being active. So the top one there is being too busy with studies. Other ones include the cost of participation. So it's something to bear in mind. Too busy socialising, quite an interesting one there. And then there's a few there just about the kind of physical barriers. So whether that is the pain of participating and the injuries you get, and also about body image and body confidence. And then on the flip side, some of the motivators to being active. So the top one there is to benefit physical health. And then you've got ones about mental health as well. So it's a stress relief. If you go down to the sort of fifth one, mental health, mental well-being. Interestingly, again, the third one there is to improve my body image. So body image, clearly an important factor there for students of today. So that's all I'm going to share just now. Probably heard enough from me already. So I'd like to pass over to Sarah. Sarah's been working at the Orium, and they've got their park run program, which has been a big success so far. And Sarah's going to give us a bit more information on that side of things. So Sarah, thanks for joining us today, and I'll hand over to yourself.
Pleasure, thank you. There was a couple of sound issues earlier. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah,
Excellent,
it's good.
brilliant, thank you. Thank you massively to SSS for having me along. It's quite nice to talk about parkrun. It feels a little bit like a distant memory at the minute, so I'm going to try my best to share my screen with you all, but being the technophobe that I am, we'll see how we get on. Can you guys see that? Are you seeing my...
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you, excellent. So yeah, thank you very much. I have been asked to talk about parkrun, but this presentation kind of veers off into a few other activities that we do as well. So I've put this picture up. This was our very, very first parkrun back in the hazy days of November 2019. And it was a massive success. It was quite a lot of it wasn't massively hard work, but there was a lot of work that went into making it happen. So if I just move on to this next little slide for you all. Pre-COVID, as is now a turn of phrase, we had 17 parkrun events in total, with around about 208 participants each week, which was brilliant. In total, over the 17 events, we had 3,537 participants. This was people that were coming along to take part in a parkrun. I probably should digress for those of you that maybe don't know what I'm talking about. It's a timed 5k that happens every Saturday morning at 9:30. People travel from far and wide, which is news to me. I didn't realise that you could be a parkrun tourist. So yeah, people travel from far and wide, and a lot of people came to bag their first O parkrun, because again they go for the alphabet, and there's not many that are O for Orium. So yeah, we have benefited a lot from parkrun tourism. So over 3,500 participants have taken part, and we've had 145 volunteers. I've put that in because, to me, and I will labour this point later on as well, volunteers are massively important in student engagement and getting students active. So I wanted to show that there was a huge amount of volunteer work that went into this programme as well. And I've put our very fabulous Great British Bake Off winner there, because that's my only claim to fame, that is that A, he's run it, and B, he's volunteered in it. So I just wanted to get that in there, if I'm entirely honest. So yeah, that gives you a little bit of an idea about parkrun and kind of what we've done to date. It began with me just having a little bit of an idea. We were doing a staff walk around campus, as a lot of us do, in the nicer weather. It's a beautiful campus out at Heriot-Watt, and it seemed to be one of those things where you go, gosh, why have I never thought of this before? I'm quite lucky. I have quite a lot of autonomy around my area at Heriot-Watt. So I went to my boss at Orium. I had a little bit of an idea. We scribbled it down on a few slides, and we presented it to the university executive, who were really keen, I think, fundamentally, because a large part of the Heriot-Watt strategy is around community and community involvement. So they were keen to make it happen. So we did, and the massive part, or the biggest part that I love about parkrun, and as I alluded to earlier, is the fact that it's completely and utterly volunteer-led. If it's not for the volunteers, it does not happen. And again, I think it becomes quite pivotal in student engagement, as if there is that intrinsic motivation to make something happen, then you need to get people with that little bit of fire in their belly to get involved and to make it happen. We started off with a presentation that I did in August 19. I had a slight feeling it could have been me, myself and I at it, but we ended up with around about 60 volunteers turning up that were keen to make sure that parkrun happened. And that's what we needed to get it across the line. We needed these people. And over the 17 events, there was a couple of times where we maybe had to scrabble for a couple of volunteers, but generally speaking, we had our volunteers turning up in droves, which was excellent. So I feel a little bit of a fraud, if I'm honest, in that I've been asked to come along and talk to you guys about student engagement, and kind of notably in the parkrun. we don't get students taking part in the park run, if I'm honest. We have loads of community, we have a lot of staff coming and getting involved, but our student numbers are really low, and that was something I was really keen to try and work on. So the question of how do we engage students, I've put this up here, A, just to make me smile, and B, it's the $1 million question, and if I knew the answer to it, I would be in one of those shiny little bungalows rather than sat in my very pink office. So yeah, I don't know. I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions of things that I think help with student engagement, and that comes from more years than I care to remember working with students. So for me, the big things that have worked is that there needs to be an investment in it from the student side of things. If they come to me and say, I would really like to do X, Y, and Z, I will do anything I can to make it happen, because I know that there's the appetite there for it. There is that willingness to kind of get involved. So always try and get something that is volunteer-led or has a little body of the students that are really keen to get involved. That's always been really pivotal for me. It needs to be well publicised. Social media is rammed with stuff these days. So we've gone old school and started printing things and putting things up in corridors on our notice boards, and it was actually having quite a big impact before COVID. But it was starting to have a big impact in our numbers and our participation through good old-fashioned print media. For student engagement, for me personally, what I've found is that it shouldn't take itself too seriously. If there can be some sort of fun or quirky element to it, something a little bit different, you're more likely to get a little bit of student involvement. I've done many an event, many an intervention, many things with students, and I've tried to do it for free, and it doesn't work. We don't get people coming along. I'm not suggesting, because I know that Neil just put up the graphic there about money being a little bit of a hindrance to activity. I'm not suggesting it needs to cost a fortune, but if there is some sort of money has changed hands, there is more likely to be that commitment. They need to get something physical out of it, so a lot of the staff I work with at the uni are brilliant at finding something for nothing. So whether it be a little pack with a tea bag in it, a stress ball and a leaflet about the benefits of physical activity and mental health, if they have something to take away in their hands, then that seems to always have a little bit of an extra tick in the box. I think our students are acutely aware of charities and awareness raising. You can see that with something like Movember. So if you can attach some sort of charity or some affiliation with something that the students are passionate about, again, that will increase that awareness. They're more likely to share it, they're more likely to get their friends involved. And it absolutely, fundamentally has to be more than just you. There needs to be a team of you that are helping to deliver it. I've only got so many ideas, and they'll all be in my little perception of what I think is going to work. So if there can be other people in there that are giving you ideas, and specifically the students that want to make it happen, then I've always found that that's got a big tick in the box. Why do it? I'm not going to labour that point, guys. You all know better than me why we need to get students more active. Again, Neil's just raised that. The mental health issues, the physical issues, you know, we're all acutely aware of that now. What I've put down here is just a couple of my thoughts that have helped me to get some of the interventions across the line. Anytime I'm presenting anything to either management at Oriam or higher up within the university, I always labour the fact that these years are highly influential for our students. A lot of them are just out of school. They've perhaps had that PE experience, which they dreaded. I'm massively in that box. I work very closely with our sports union, but they all will tell you that I am not remotely sporty. I don't know if you can see, there's the static bike there. I'm exercise through and through. So, you know, there's a lot of students that have had that experience that's not been positive with regards to sport and physical activity. So trying to give them something that gives them that little extra taste that we all experience, we all love out of being active. So I would always labour that point. And these are a little bit mercenary, and I swithered about putting them in or not, but these are things that have helped me get some of our initiatives across the line. Is that if you can show that your students are healthier, that they are engaged in their studies, that they are physically active, you are going to end up with improved grades. These students are more invested, which ultimately looks better on league tables. And equally, if again we get such great feedback from our students through all of our sporting events, all of our physical activity stuff, through Orium, that it's been the most positive part of their university experience, being active, meeting friends, going to parties afterwards that they've met through the sports union, you know, all these things, they go on and on and on. If they've had that improved experience, if they've enjoyed their studies, ultimately you're going to get a better score in your student experience survey, which again looks better. So like I say, it's mildly mercenary, but these are all facts and figures that the university need to see to be able to attach money to some of these initiatives. So that's why I've put that final little slide in there from me. There's a whole host of events that we have run, but the park run has without doubt been the most publicised and the most successful with regards to numbers. It just hasn't yet been as successful with our students, but when we're allowed to go back to normal life, I shall be working on that. So yeah, my contact details are there, and I think if we've got any questions, then feel free to fire them at us as we go.
Excellent, thanks very much, Sarah. That was really interesting. And I noticed, yeah, so great that Peter has been along and taken part in the park run. I'll be getting pelters from our comms guy Gav if I didn't mention that Peter is actually on the latest SSS podcast, available on all good podcast vendors. So have a look at that. Have a listen. Yes, there's some really interesting stuff in there. I guess a quick question for me is, you mentioned that at the moment student population hasn't been hugely engaged. I guess where's the kind of balance for you guys? Because I know the community around the Heriot-Watt campus is really important. And I guess for you, what would be the ideal kind of balance between student and staff engagement, as well as engaging the wider community on that side of Edinburgh?
Yes, it's I suppose potentially a bit of a no-brainer. Staff and student activity is absolutely paramount. That's what we're there for. That's what pays my wage bill, is trying to increase that activity level with staff and students. I think to see the local community involved is excellent. Like I said, it's a strand of the university strategy, is looking at our local community, so that massively ticked that box. But I need to then get students more involved in the park run and all of our other events, and we're really lucky. You know, we've got 27% of our student population engaged with the sports union and with Orium, which is fabulous, and in black and white it looks like good numbers, but then there's still that extra huge chunk of the population that aren't engaging with us, and we need to work out why. That's fundamentally the next question, and we're hopeful that we're going to do a little bit of a study around, you know, why are our students not engaging with us? Are they being active but potentially not just with us, which I think is quite often the case. You know, there's budget gyms on every street corner now where students are accessing these rather than the world-class facilities that they have on their doorstep when they're coming into university. So yeah, we need to look at that pathway and what is it that is ticking their boxes for them being engaged and being active, and therefore what can we deliver and what can we offer through Orium. And we just don't have the answer to that yet because we don't have the data, and that's what we need to work on.
Great. And a quick question there from Claire. You think you would have had as much success without the branding of Parkrun?
If I'm honest, no. I have run various charity fundraising events over the years, and some have been massively successful, some have not been as successful. The Park Run brand has absolutely drawn people onto the campus, and even without parkrun now, we'll still see people running around that campus. I mean, a lot of the local community have now come down, and it's part of their, we were discussing earlier, the highlight of your day when you get to go out for your walk. It's become part of people's daily life to walk around campus, but that parkrun banner was the draw, and that's why I was mentioning that presentation. If you can have an affiliate, if you can have something that staff or students are passionate about or want to be involved with, then try and get them involved as much as you can. There's only so much that we can deliver in the time and the budget that we have, and if these things are successful and are happening elsewhere, then let's see if we can find ways to work together and get more people more active more often.
Brilliant. And there's a few more questions coming in, and that's great. And anyone watching, keep them coming. I'm going to jump over to Fraser just now, though. Fraser from Scottish Cycling. Following you on social media, you've been up to a huge amount this past year, even despite lockdown. So hopefully get a wee bit of insight from that. But Fraser, the floor is yours. We can all see the slides, so that's good.
Perfect. That was my first question. So thanks, Neil, for having me along today to this webinar. Previous to my role at Scottish Cycling, so I've been the club development manager now for about the last year and a half. Previous to that, I was an regional development officer, and then previous to that, I worked at the University of Glasgow sport development team. So I'm going to touch a little bit on kind of previous programs that I've seen within the university setting. Also, what the kind of current offering is at Scottish Cycling, and how that could support universities and colleges to engage the inactive, and also some lessons learned from the pandemic that I've seen across our club community that could potentially also help to reach people that are inactive. So the first kind of one I was going to look at was the Daily Mile, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. And this is something that I introduced along with one of my colleagues when I was at Glasgow University, really to address a kind of culture of sedentary behaviour on campus. And initially, this was very much introduced as a programme focusing on staff, but it did also kind of roll out to students as well. University of Glasgow, in both of its campuses, in Glasgow is fortunate to have access to great green spaces, and a lot of it was easy to make up 1 mile routes that people could get out and explore the natural environment. For us, it was free and accessible, so we weren't asking people to be members of the gym, but it did provide an opportunity for staff within the university sport team to speak to the participants about what else was on offer for university sport. I guess in regards to kind of what is needed to make it successful, I think the number one thing is institution backing of such a kind of initiative, and kind of partnered with that is leaders embracing it. We great support at the University in Glasgow from the kind of main student comms team, and we've got good exposure across the campus. But what's really key for me is that the culture of sedentary behaviour, which perhaps got even worse now we're all working from home, needs strong leadership from senior leaders within universities to really not see people feeling pressured that they've got to be attached to their desk, or they've got to take their lunch break in the office. They are able to use that half hour or hour or whatever they've got to get outside and to do what's often very relaxed exercise. But there's a lot of research out there of the benefits of walking, and I'd probably plug at this point at Pass for All, who are doing a lot of work across the country just to really amplify that message, particularly now as we kind of go through a winter lockdown. So for us, sometimes the engagement was really low, and I was kind of reflecting when Sarah was talking about the kind of figures in terms of the number of staff and the number of students on campuses. We were talking about thousands of staff that we'd sometimes be reaching out to, and seeing a handful of people coming out. So certainly communication is always a challenge, I think, on universities. We're really trying to cut through everything else that is going on. So we went traditional too. Sarah talked about posters and that's what we did. I remember going into the mailroom and posters and flyers to go around staff rooms and corridors around the university, but also having a presence when these things are happening. Because I think if you just put out the maps and says here's some routes where you could go, for some people they're needing that presence in order to encourage them to do it. So we'd often move location around the campus and tie it into kind of health and well-being weeks that might be happening in different departments to encourage people to get out. And sometimes a little bit of peer pressure helped to get people out. I think particularly with students, I think there was sometimes you kind of listed off the excuses on your kind of first slide, Neil, and we kind of heard them all as well. I think there's some stuff just like the library at the Glasgow University was always really busy, and people would be worried about leaving their desk and then not having a space when they came back, so they wouldn't take a break, despite the importance that going for a walk could offer. So the Daily Mile is one for me that it's free and accessible, and I think it'd be great to see more organisations, not even just institutions, adopting that in their ways of working. I guess now looking at what's on offer from Scottish Cycling. So traditionally, Scottish Cycling has been very much the governing body for the sport, and that's involved supporting our network of clubs across the country. But over the last 5 years or so, we started to invest and roll out participation programs, which are really there to in recognition of the fact that club sport can be really off-putting for some people. A lot of our clubs will market themselves, that a ride will be at easy pace, which is 17 to 18 miles an hour. That's quite fast. Or no drop policies, and just a lot of the kind of culture and imagery that's associated with clubs can sometimes be quite off-putting for new people trying to get into cycling. So our participation programs are designed to be that place where people that are looking really to get at the start of the sport, to get out for a couple of miles and to build up over time. So we have two main programs that we have in Scotland, Breeze and Guided Rides, and I'll go on over the next couple of slides to kind of go into them in more detail. But essentially, they're free programs that can provide opportunities to provide pathways into club sport. So some of our clubs use these as vehicles by which to capture new members and offer them introductory experiences into the sport. But they can also help clubs, institutions reach new participants that aren't already active in partnership with third sector groups. It is volunteer led, but there's also a network of local support across the country. So we've got 5 part-time coordinators that work across Scotland to provide support to volunteers to help them get their programme started. So looking at Breeze, Breeze is our kind of women-only programme, available across the UK. It's for all abilities, and the rides are anything from 3 to 50 miles. They're led by Breeze champions, and it's a free training course that we offer, which gives a kind of variety of different things to the volunteers to take part. And there's active networks already across most of the university and college cities and towns. So if it's something that institutions are looking at as ways to engage staff or engage students into cycling for the first time, there's already groups in existence in most of the university and college cities and towns. But there's also that opportunity that if you've got willing volunteers, that the free training can be provided. And I put Melanie Toner's email there, who leads our participation programme, who can provide more information about them. We've also got guided rides, which are kind of open to everyone, and it's very much the same kind of T's and C's and what they involve as Breeze. I guess probably to address some of the challenges for cycling in universities or colleges, I guess in contrast to running, where you can pretty much just walk up and do it, cycling obviously always has that equipment barrier. For us, what we've seen a lot of clubs do is look at how they can link up with third sector partners. So we've got a number of social enterprises across the country, a lot in university cities, things like Bike for Good, the Bike Station, Recycle Bike, Most university or college cities and towns have got places where you can get access to equipment fairly cheap. Conflicting priorities or finding the time. I think cycling can always be seen as something you've got to put a fair bit of time into to get better. And you can't always just do it instantaneously. But apparently, through our participation programs, the range of different options that are provided for people help people wrap it around their work schedules. And we've seen some examples through our another agency, Cycling UK, who run Bells and Bikes. They've done some work in some of the universities, I think in Glasgow, and they've put on rides at lunchtimes, they put them on Wednesday afternoons, they put them on at weekends at times to suit what people are looking for. And apparently, when it's a volunteer-led program, you've got that flexibility there to be able to go and do that. It's also obviously in Glasgow and Edinburgh in particular, the city hire schemes with the bikes that are accessible as well for people to get into them. Mostly, one of the constants through lockdown has been the ability to exercise and the ability to take part in physical activity. Apparently, this time round, being able to do it with someone else, I think, is good if you've had enough of spending time with your family. You want to see someone else. So I just pulled together a couple of things here that I've seen kind of from our club network over the course of the pandemic that they've used to engage their members and also potential members as well. I think probably the really interesting thing has been the rise in digital technology and the way that clubs have used digital technology to engage members, but also recognise that actually the physical structure of a club doesn't suit a lot of people. Rigid training times, the length and duration of training sessions, etc. So actually, some of these digital options I put up there, virtual riding platforms, Zwift and RGT Racing, there's several others as well. They allow people to drop in for an hour and then get on the rest of the day, or do it in the evening after they put kids to bed or whatever. So a lot of clubs are now exploring, are these avenues by which we can actually expand our membership, offer digital membership. So there's no longer physical interaction with members, but actually it becomes quite an attractive way to engage people. And particularly on the theme of engaging the inactive, a lot of the virtual riding platforms, you can't see each other, and you can set it up in such ways where people can't be dropped, and you can't tell how much effort individuals are putting in. You're all, from the platform's point of view, all look like you're going at the same pace. So I think that's another good way of bringing new people in. So we're wanting to try and case study this as much as possible. I think as we moved into the second lockdown, I think energy sapped a little bit in the club community to go back to all this stuff again. We got a kind of period of being able to do stuff again in a physical setting over August, September, October time. But there's lots of good examples out there of clubs and even within university sport of actually responding to the challenge of the pandemic and finding innovative ways to engage their current members and also look at ways to engage future members too. And I think that's it from me.
That's brilliant. Well, thanks very much for that, Fraser. That's some really good insight, and also some really good insight into your time at University of Glasgow and working with them. I was just wondering, Scottish Cycling will work with student cycling clubs, but is there any institutions that you work with directly? And I guess what would be some advantages of working directly with governing bodies at a more strategic level?
Yeah, so probably one good example has been actually last year we worked quite closely with the University of Glasgow, the Glasgow University Cycling Club and the local youth cycling club, Glasgow Riders, to basically plug a gap in the calendar. One of our kind of biggest participation disciplines in cycling in Scotland is called Cyclocross, which is kind of off-road cycling on a road bike with knobby tyres. And Glasgow, despite being Scotland's biggest city, actually had very few events that children and young people could take part in, that students could take part in, and that beginners could take part in. So we came together over the course of last year to put on 2 events that offered introductory coaching for people to try it out for the first time, reduced cost entry for students to participate, provided bikes to some students that wouldn't be able to take part otherwise, and also provide opportunities for the University Cycling Club and the local youth club to work more closely with the kind of surrounding community as well, to engage them in what was going on, and that was a good way of showcasing that kind of partnership working, and it's a good model that we'd hopefully like to see kind of rolled out in other locations as well. And we've seen it a bit in the past in Stirling. I know my previous colleagues worked pretty closely with the University of Stirling Cycling Club to put on a number of events, so very much centered around events in terms of the kind of work that we've done in the past, but it's always been quite a proven good way of engaging students in the sport.
Yeah, that's great, and really interesting actually to hear you say that the kind of traditional methods of communication work for you guys as well. To kind of echo what Sarah was saying, I guess I would imagine for a lot of people that initial thought is, let's get things on social media, let's get things out there. But I guess you've got such a huge student population on campus and staff population on campus all the time that actually maybe it is time to kind of rethink how these things are communicated. Ian, I might come to yourself now just to maybe get your initial thoughts on everything we've heard so far, and how you think that kind of fits into the work that we're doing at SSSize.
Yeah, thanks very much, Neil. But thanks to Fraser and Sarah for the presentations, both great insights into your work. I think what's came across has been quite apparent is the need for leadership within organisations, but the need to create a culture of activity within organisations. And it's really quite simple for people to go around their business in the way they've always done, which is sitting at a desk for 8 hours and not moving from that desk. And I think all of us who are here listening today and taking part today are agents for change to get people more physically active. So we need to walk the walk, and we need to lead by example, and try and do that as much as possible. And it's interesting coming to join SSSize in the last 2 weeks, and SSSize as an organisation is really doing that. So it's relatively simple things like actually holding walking meetings. Don't say that, yeah, we can do walking meetings. We actually do walking meetings. And by actually having physical activity into team meetings and such like as well, we are actually walking the walk. We're leading the charge, if that makes sense. And I also think that what we need to consider at times is which is difficult for us as sports professionals at times to do, but to really consider why people are inactive and try and have a real sense of empathy towards the reasons behind people not taking part in physical activity. And one of the things I compare it to is people playing computer games. People play computer games because they're easy to take part in initially. You get rewarded with success quickly, and there's a real sense of social activity within that. And I think if we can try and frame or picture physical activity in a similar way, we could maybe try and get more inactive people active. So I think that would be my thoughts on the discussion so far.
Yeah, and a good point there, and around the kind of social aspect, and that falls back into what Bucks actually found. They found that as a barrier was students were wanting to do other things as social activities, and I guess there's something there around framing these events as social activities first and foremost, and then, oh, by the way, you're getting some exercise, you're going to feel better, you're going to improve your mental health and all these kind of things. So it may be, again, there's something there around the kind of communication and how we put across these events and advertise these kind of events to take place. There's a question come in. Do any of you have any examples of folding in student services in these conversations about getting more students active? They might have data around mental health, disabilities, etc. that might be useful. So I don't know, Ian and Sarah maybe got a bit more experience in that. I don't know who wants to come in on that one.
So if I could maybe answer, or partly answer that, not necessarily from a a student services point of view, but we ran a pilot 2 years ago into holding walking tutorials and walking supervisory meetings at Abertay University. And we thought it would be quite an easy thing to do, but actually getting academics away from their desk was quite a difficult thing to do. But we set up a lot of guidelines and advice for the academics to follow to try and hold these walking tutorials and walking meetings. And actually, the feedback we got was very positive. But both the student and the academic almost had to but actually had to agree to a contract before taking part in these walking meetings. So in order to really frame it in the correct way, the student really needed to know what was expected from them. And it also involved a little bit of a follow-up from our academic colleagues to almost follow the walking up with notes from the meeting as well. So it involved a little bit more work, which caused a little bit of a barrier. But what we found is that students who were engaged in that, they felt that they were getting more from their supervisor, and as a result, they would feel more confident about their studies at the same time. So it was a way of doing health by stealth, I guess.
Love that, health by stealth. Yeah, Sarah, you come.
Like I said earlier, I think the more people that you can have involved in trying to deliver these interventions or activities or however we choose to brand them, I think has a massive impact. I thought that I worked quite well with a lot of different aspects of the university pre-pandemic, but actually us all being stuck at home and working physically in silos now has massively changed a lot of the work that happens on campus now, and there are groups now that meet on a regular basis that have have representation from a lot of the other departments in the university that doesn't just include wellbeing, chaplaincy, Orium, counselling service, and obviously, I should say the Students' Union and the Sports Union, but includes different elements. We've got some of the academics there that are invested and want to see how we can get the students more active. We've got, different branches of the university that were probably massively untapped and have some really great ideas, occasionally have a little bit of budget as well, and are invested. It comes back to that thing where if people are invested in it, it's more likely to happen. And I kind of naively thought that I was tapping into these resources beforehand, but I think the loneliness of working at home sometimes in lockdown number 1 meant that there were a lot more of these conversations happening, which is great, and they have continued, so that can only have a positive impact on activity in the coming months, I think.
Fraser, you want to come in on that one as well?
Yeah, I guess just a little bit kind of maybe building on the communications point that Sarah kind of mentioned earlier. I think, the fundamental thing for me is that if people that are inactive, they aren't following our channels. They don't like the student union, or they don't like the university sport facility on Facebook or Twitter. They're not following us. They are accessing their student experience through different channels, and that's where what kind of Sarah's described is so essential. And be that the library, and I know that one of the previous sports presidents at Glasgow was looking at getting kind of visuals on the lifts to encourage people to take the stairs and that kind of thing. There were student unions, but also things like the accommodation providers. They, particularly at Glasgow Uni, everyone that stayed in university student halls, got free access to the gym. Sometimes actually, even that seemed like a massive journey to make. So, can you take sport closer to students, or physical activity closer to students, and provide pop-up classes and like kind of Sarah says, just very traditional forms of media. But I think fingers crossed people get back on campus at some point. But there's almost a kind of generation of students and and probably some staff now that have lost connection with, the student bodies and also the different kind of establishments within the universities, that it's going to be really hard to get that message out there again. And I think that's where there's almost needs to be a concerted drive to have, as many different programs and options available as people start to populate our campuses again, so that it's part of the routine that people establish, because it's probably a whole generation of students that have never lived a kind of student life in terms of working out when they would go to the gym or what happens on Wednesday afternoons, etc. So there's probably a real opportunity there as well to look at how that's right front and centre as people kind of settle into a new routine when, hopefully, in the not too distant future, when we're back on campuses.
Yeah, it's definitely it's making sport and physical activity part of that student experience conversation, and that's so important for institutions, colleges, and universities at the moment, and especially going forward. So it's just making sure that we are championing that agenda there and making sure we're part of the conversation. And there's a couple more questions come in. There's one on volunteering and there's one on college sport. So I'll go volunteering first. So in your experience, what are the good ways to get student volunteers and students to volunteer? Are any particular platforms, tactics, or enticements and motivators that you have found successful? Sarah, I know you touched on the kind of cultural influencers or leaders. What's the best way to engage them and really make the most of their eagerness to be involved?
Yeah, I'm really lucky. I mentioned earlier I work really closely with our sports union, and they have a fantastic volunteer programme which acknowledges the hours that these students have put in, and some of them have put in countless hours for their sport. So you've then got your bronze, silver, gold medals that you get at the end of the academic year, which then sit really nicely on their certificate that they get once they graduate. And I know a lot of other unis adopt that similar process, but having that journey where they can see that they get something back for this volunteering that the students are doing. And that's something that I really look to try and get the university as a whole involved in, and not just on the sport side of things. Again, I labour that fact that I am not sporty, but I love being active. So looking at how we can get people to volunteer I just dropped a little reply to a question there. I hope it got out there. Because somebody was saying, if the branding, if it wasn't park run, then would it work? And could the timings change and all that kind of stuff? So we're trying to put all these different events in and trying to make sure that people are getting involved. But if there's not that appetite for it to happen, and I totally agree with what Fraser's saying about let's put loads on to try and get people active, but if they're not invested in it, if they don't want it, then they're not going to come. So it's trying to take that steer from the students. What is it you want? And we will try and enable you to make it happen. And if on the back of that they get, whether it's a pat on the back or whether it is something that does sit on their certificate, they're more likely to be involved. Where you find these students, I'm not entirely sure. Like I say, it's a tried and tested path with the sports union, which is great, but we need to try and get some of these other students that are not potentially sporty involved in some way, shape or form. And you see it through the students union, through their societies. Students are massively getting involved in these things, but how do we get them active is still the $1 million question, like I said earlier.
And Fraser, I guess from your work dealing with community clubs, is there any kind of best practice there around that volunteer reward and recognition that we can learn within student sport?
Yeah, I mean, I think university sport is sometimes better at it than some of the community settings. I think, in my experience in Glasgow, the promise of a free T-shirt often won people over, and they turn up at all hours to come and volunteer for you. I think in the community setting, there's a real focus for us at the moment about working with our clubs to really clearly articulate what they're wanting from people. I think actually initially when we went into lockdown, a lot of clubs found that a lot more people were coming forward to express their interest in volunteering. but it's because people were at a certain point in their lives where they weren't commuting every day, and suddenly they recognised this extra bit of free time that they had. But that's not going to be the case forever. And certainly, there's been massive disengagement from volunteers as well, because they have taken more time for themselves and adopted different routines, etc. So for us, we work with our clubs to have really clear role descriptors about what you're looking for, and look beyond your club community. A lot of our clubs have sometimes framed volunteer opportunities in a really negative light, using the kind of line that the club will crumble if no one steps forward and that kind of thing. That's been proven to be really ineffective, and it means you end up getting people in roles for longer than they want to be, or feeling pushed into a role just because if they don't, then it'll be pointed at them that the club hasn't continued on. So we're looking at clubs at the moment about using the a network of third sector interfaces. So every local authority's got a volunteer bureau that actually, particularly just now, are completely overwhelmed with volunteers. So many people have put themselves forward to support with a pandemic response. There's lots of people coming out that have never volunteered before. And as we start to emerge from that, if sport can start to articulate what opportunities it has, there could be a lot of new people that actually are wanting to continue on volunteering in different aspects as we emerge from the pandemic. So for us at the moment, that's a big focus, is how we can make those links, because it's often places that clubs haven't worked with before, and then hopefully see clubs benefit from the kind of peak and rise in the number of people that want to volunteer.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point about over the past year with the pandemic, we have seen a massive surge in people volunteering, whether it's people going back into help in hospitals or at supermarkets, all this kind of thing. So there's maybe a really good opportunity there to sort of grab hold of that, tidal wave of volunteer support, and make sure that students in future years we're embracing them and making sure that they have an outlet for that. So some great points there. Come to you in a second, and I'm going to ask you a question about how to solve college sport. So a nice easy one for you to finish on. But there's a couple of points that have come up in the chat, so thanks for sharing. First one, Ian, are you sitting in your local pub? I'm assuming that's the Guinness poster in the background. Point coming from Mark Brennan. Mark's one of the development managers at Bucks, so thanks for joining us, Mark. A lot of feedback we are getting is around virtual fatigue, which is playing a big part in lessons. Engaging in wellness type activities have proved popular. So good to hear that that's been encouraged across the UK, and that's seeming to work. Students taking part in challenges and activities, and that's great. And I know that Heriot Watt are doing their half marathon training at the moment, which is proving a big success. So good luck to everyone that's taken part in that, and it'll be great to hear maybe some feedback about how that's worked in time. There's another one from Claire as well, just a bit of best practice sharing. They've encouraged schools to facilitate activity as a way to meet students face to face. School of Medicine embraced this and started running groups. So yeah, there's lots of good examples there of schools actually recognising that sport and physical activity is a great way to meet up and to keep everyone connected, I guess, which is one of the most important things at the moment. Yeah, so there was the question there. I think Ian's already answered it. Great. I see you've answered that in the chat, Ian, but I wonder if you want to just chat us through your thinking. Question was around college sport, and I guess the culture of student sport is not quite the same in the colleges at the moment. But like the question says, there's so much untapped potential. So I wonder if you have any top tips, I guess, for colleges, but maybe also some of those institutions, the universities that don't quite have the same sporting structure as the likes of your Heriot Watts.
Yeah, of course. First of all, I'm not in the pub. I'm in the TV room. I've got two teenagers I'm hiding from, so that's why I'm banished to the wee room. I think it's important to highlight that the college campuses and college courses and the college experience is slightly different than universities' experiences. So at times I don't think we need to really think that both should be exactly the same, because it's a different experience that the students are engaging in. However, from my experience and from working on both types of campuses, college students tend to operate in their own silos of their courses a little bit more than university students tend to. So as a result, I think sport seems to feel like it's only for the sports students. And I think anything that tries to spread the value of being active away from just the sports students would be really, really important. And I think you can do some relatively small things, but which really increase the visibility of people being active. So the example I gave in the chat was by moving equipment into corridors so people could see it. So this was a table tennis table we moved from a cupboard gathering dust into a corridor, and suddenly people are playing table tennis because they can see it. So I think being a bit more visual is really important, and being sort of innovative on how you do that. But also, most college campuses have sports students. I think utilising them to be the agents of change, or being the activity leaders into other courses, could be really important as well. And actually get them, challenge them as part of their course to get other cohorts of students more active. There's challenges in around the curriculum or the sort of timetable at colleges, which make Wednesday afternoons, for example, a bit more difficult. So perhaps it's more of the experiences. It's trying to do fun runs, fun cycles, fun tournaments, but perhaps not on a weekly basis, but more ad hoc basis, which could be a route to get more activity on campus. But I think it is important to highlight that a college campus is slightly different than a university campus. So we should try and think of different ways to engage with students in that way.
Definitely, and it comes back to what we were saying, and you mentioned it there about that kind of cross-party working and getting the academic side involved and getting the states involved, so that there is like a greater buy-in across the entire college campus. I mean, another thing in that area is our healthy body, healthy mind work. It's a great way to ingrain that kind of working into college life. I know 5 colleges have done really well at that, and there's a few others that have signed up. So for any colleges looking for a bit of support in that area, then that's a good place to start. We'll take one more question. I know we're at 16:59. We'll probably go over for about 5 minutes. So if anyone does need to leave, then that's absolutely understandable. But we'll maybe answer this question and ask you all for your kind of closing thoughts, I guess, after that. So the question here, when I was a teenager, I was very inactive, large part because I didn't have and couldn't afford proper sports bras. Do you have any advice on how to help people who might be struggling to be active, like wanting to, due to not having been able to afford the right equipment? So the bigger question there is around the kind of right equipment or clothing. Is there any advice? I know, Fraser, you touched on that, the kind of accessing bikes and these sorts of things, but just wondering if any of you have any other advice around in that kind of area.
I guess just firstly, actually, I know that that Sport Scotland kind of pre-pandemic was starting some work with some local authorities to look at how we could connect clubs to social enterprises to donate sports kit that could then be used or given out from these kind of social enterprises. I think it was called kit from clubs or something like that. So my understanding is that's going to be launched at some point safe in the future when the pandemic's over, and hopefully that'll be something that is accessible to university and college students in particular. And that was intended to kind of, I know it was definitely going to be in Stirling, so there might be other places as well. So off the top of my head, that's kind of the one that sticks out for me that could potentially help to answer some of that question.
Yeah, it's good to know that kind of project is out there. Good to hear, and yeah, definitely good to try and encourage better working with things like social enterprises. I'll maybe come around and ask for your kind of key takeaways. I'll give you a second to think about it, and I can provide some of mine. I think what we've talked about around changing the culture of our campuses and our staff and student populations, and relying on those kind of influencers and leaders within those communities. Communication, bit of a revelation to to say, well, maybe actually paper-based, although we do want to encourage sustainability, might be a good and worthwhile way to relook at that. So a couple of key takeaways for me. Sarah, I'll maybe come to yourself first, if there's anything you want to highlight just the last couple of minutes.
Yeah, I just jotted down 2 words, one being mindful and one being flexible. I think currently we need to be mindful that there are a lot of students out there that I think somebody maybe mentioned fatigue earlier. I think students are not currently getting the experience that they have been sold all of their years. You know, it's that go to uni, go to college, you get to have parties, you get to meet people. They're not getting that experience just now. So if there's anything we can do that brings a little bit of fun and excitement to their day and adds to that social element, I think needs celebrated and needs discussed and needs shared as a bit of best practice. I know that, harking on about our sports union again, but I know that they've done a lot of stuff through Zoom. They've managed to get socials together through various online channels, and you know, ways to keep people engaged and involved in that until we get back to normality, I think definitely needs to be celebrated. And the other word was just being flexible. I think we don't know the long-term ramifications of this last year, and I think if we can find ways that we can be as flexible as we possibly can to try and nurture and encourage students back to being active in whichever way is appropriate for them. Good luck to us all as we find our way. But yeah, just try and be flexible. Perhaps the things that we did before might not work again, so let's just see what we can do and keep sharing that best practice.
Brilliant, thank you. And Fraser, have you got some words of wisdom to leave us with?
Yeah, I think probably just kind of echoing something I've probably said already, that I think we just need to be prepared for the fact that, you know, the model of sport we operated in 2019 might not be sufficient going forward. You know, it might not be the way that people want to engage in sport and physical activity. And I think just be, you know, embrace that, be excited about the opportunities that presents us and being able to reach some of these people that are inactive. And I guess, you know, not lose sight of that goal of just reaching more people and you know, using different means that we have developed. I mean, you know, we probably wouldn't have been doing this kind of webinar a year or so ago. So, you know, you use these different platforms that do help us reach different people, and yeah, and just share that best practice as well, which I know that you know the student sports sector is good at doing, and just keep spreading that learning, because I think student sport and the student sport clubs are going to need that, you know, ideas and inspiration to kind of keep them moving forward.
Great, thank you. And Ian, a couple of takeaways from you, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. I think I would just like to say that we're all in this to help people. That's what sports development is all about, and to really emphasize that this could be quite a long game. You know, this is a long game, and actually changing people's behaviour takes time. So for anyone who's involved in setting up new programs or new initiatives, don't be too disheartened if you don't have hundreds of people taking part, because actually some small steps might be enough to actually make a real change in one person's life. And we were speaking about being inactive. Actually, that first step might be walking to the shop to get a pint of milk rather than jumping in the car and such like. So some of the outcomes that we might not, you know, we might not see the fruits of our labour initially in terms of new gym members or new club members and such like, but through the work we're doing, we'll all make a difference. I think that's important to highlight as well, because you could easily be downhearted if you don't get loads of people engaging in what you're doing, but you could still be making a difference. You're just not aware of it.
Excellent, thank you. Well, we're just slightly after 5, so that's not too bad. I hope everyone's going to get out for a walk this evening and walk the walk, as we were saying at the start. Sarah and Fraser and Ian, thank you so much for your time today. That's been really excellent listening to you and learning from you. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and if there's anything we can help with within the Scottish Student Sport Network going forward, then please do give us a shout. Thank you to all those that attended, the attendees that are watching, and for all the comments and questions. We really appreciate that. We hope that's given you some food for thought. We hope that the webinar today has sparked some inspiration, but don't let the conversation stop just now. Keep working away, keep working and collaborating across regions and across Scotland to get more people active. So thank you. Thanks everyone. Enjoy your evening, and we'll see you in the next webinar soon.